Welcome everybody. My name is Daniel Maldonado. I am with the Orlando ServiceNow Developer Meetup group here in Orlando, and I'm here along with Mark Kilby. He will be our next guest speaker for our next meetup coming up in April 9th, and he will be speaking about what it is agile and demystifying what this whole concept of the agile methodology.
As you can tell from the gray hairs, I've been at this a long time. I started off actually as an electrical engineer, but shifted into software fairly quickly. And with that, went from software developer to lead developer, project manager, program manager, and that was actually the first 10 years. And then at one point, I was working for a boss where everything was priority one, and that priority changed every 5 minutes. It is about the same time that I came across this book that talked about extreme programming. So this was right at the start of the 2000s. And that was the one that changed my whole career, because it talked about how you work in iterations, how you take small slices of work, how you get feedback on that work. And I have been using those lessons and many more in various industries. So I actually started off in the federal government space, but I've also worked in publishing, energy generation, insurance. I'm probably forgetting a few in there, but I've been in many different industries, worked with not only IT groups, but also sales and marketing, teach them how to iterate, how to take these small slices of work, gather feedback to figure out what's the next best move to deliver value. So that's kind of my background in a nutshell, and have also done a lot of work with distributed teams. And long story short, that's in a book, which I published in late 2018 with Johanna Rothman. And then we all know what happened in 2020. Yeah, so got to put a lot of that experience to practice in the last few years.
Recently, learning about development, learning about coding. I work on websites. I'm a Wix developer, so I do some back end code and like dynamic things. I like to see things kind of like work right away.
Yep.
I like to see test it right away. So it's pretty cool to work on that platform. And in the past couple years, I got into what it is ServiceNow. I was a Salesforce admin
Oh,
like 5 years ago, but it took me really like it was really hard to get into that industry. I will apply.
yeah.
They were looking for experience. They were looking for certifications. They were looking for bachelor degrees. I never finished college, but I feel like I have the experience to do the work, right?
Yeah.
So I'm a self-taught, self-learner, and that's why I was interested in getting involved with our ServiceNow developer group, and we helped restart that here in Orlando last year.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize it was restarted. That's cool. Because
Yeah,
I see a lot of demand on the job boards for ServiceNow.
yeah, and the ServiceNow has been exploding over the past couple of years. There's so many. They have a new program that they want to teach about 1 million people how to use ServiceNow and support it. So, they are definitely doing their part as far as the ServiceNow side. So us as a user group, we want to also be part of that and come up with cool projects for people to have some hands-on experience. Even though a couple years ago, I actually worked with some volunteers because I also serve at a nonprofit organization.
Okay.
And I just came up with some projects, and I had some people that gave us like an application, and just volunteering with us, it helped them get a career in the platform. So
Nice.
we've been helping other people. So now it's like what else, what's the next step, and I think what you are going to be teaching on April 9th is really important. The agile methodology, that was something kind of new to me as being coming from a support role, that
Yeah,
we just, we kind of like see everything kind of like done, and try to figure out how it works, and how to fix the problems that arise later on. But how do they get to that level? They need to plan and develop and reiterate. So I see how
yeah.
the
And
agile methodology is perfect for that.
yeah, and I mean, Agile is now over 20 years old, and it's changed a lot too. So um, in the talk, I'll try not to get too much into the history and talk a little bit more about where Agile is now. I'll give a little bit because people will know certain words, and it could be things that are really not the most up to date terms. So there's newer terms, there's newer concepts, and so I'll try to bring people up to speed on that and let
Yeah.
them focus on what's the most important things for them to consider as they look at an agile approach, no matter what it is, whether it's developing ServiceNow or how do you interact with an agile team as your customer support, maybe you're in some other role. How, what are some important things to know? Because I've even had when I used to run the Agile Orlando group, used to have recruiters come in and they would ask us questions about Agile. We said, yeah, come to our sessions. Why not? Well, you can learn about it too. So,
Yeah, it's really useful, and I did take one time like one of these courses that talked about it, and it was interesting how it came about. It was like a group of people that got together in one place, and
yeah.
and they
Yeah.
came up with this whole. It was kind of like the Declaration of Independence, something like that, right? So
Yeah, the snowbird gathering. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. So they came out with these concepts, and it just helps standardize the process, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
it
Well, there's that, and also where that started was before then, there were a lot of other concepts adding a lot of structure and a lot of different stages and checkpoints in the software, doing some analysis, checking that it's all correct, doing some design, making sure that's all correct, and then developing and then testing. But the problem they found was by the time it got all the way to the end and delivered, they may not be delivering exactly the right thing. That the business might have changed, the customer's needs might have changed. So one of the big motivations is how do you get something out quicker with quality, with good design, but quicker so you can see, all right, is this slice of functionality, is this closer to what you want? If so, we'll keep adding other pieces. We'll keep adding other slices. Yeah. So that was a big thing. And it's not that there's not any safety checks or quality checks. That's still part of it as well.
It's kind of like they're releasing it like drop by drop, kind of
Yeah,
like
yeah, and we see evidence of this every day. Unfortunately, my cell phone's in the other room, but we get app updates on our phone all the time. The ones that are updating more frequently are probably using an agile method, especially if it's a mid to large size company. But you see the same things in your web apps and everywhere else. So when you see those frequent updates, it's probably an agile process driving that.
yeah, and they build on what's working, right? So
Yeah.
I do like live streaming for our church, and we have
Mhm.
one of these ATIM mini express extreme switchers, right?
Yeah, right.
and
Yeah.
and it does a lot of functionality, right? And I'm every so often I go on the website to see if there's any updates, and that the Black Magic team, they constantly are updating their products, and
Yeah.
it's pretty cool to see that. And even my kids they play video games on the computer, and yesterday my son is like, hey, there's a new update came out for this game for Wobbly Life, and it's like a sewer thing, and now the monster, he used to be our friend, and now he attacks us.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
So
And
like,
and a lot of the game studios use Agile these days. Uh, Matter of fact, here in Orlando, we've got Full Sail University, and they teach not only game production, but agile methods to build those games. So it's very much a part of that industry as well.
I wonder if you can apply agile to almost anything out there, as far as working with groups, right? Is that you see
You
that
can apply it to many things. So I've used Agile to plan a conference, to run a conference. We've used it here at home. So I'll talk a little bit about that in the when I talk about Kanban versus personal Kanban, I'll talk a little bit about that. And,
Yeah.
and actually, that's the best way to learn it is how can you apply it personally? So, like, how can you organize maybe different projects you got going on, whether it's work or at home? And how do you look at the different priorities? How do you look at I've got too much going on, and how do I adjust for that rather than go it's rather than freaking out, so
I know this will be useful because me and my wife, we serve at our church,
yep,
and they always got projects going on. They got different events, and
yeah,
like they always know what's going on because they're doing it. They're talking between each other. The women, they talk a lot, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
so sometimes the guys, they're like over here, they're like, I don't follow all the text all the messages, but I'm there, if you need me for anything.
yeah,
But I think we need to be part of it by just knowing what we are expected to do, and like what are we contributing to the whole project, to move it
yeah,
forward.
yeah.
So
Well, and that's a huge part of it. And we'll talk about this more in the talk, but it's not so much whether you use a board or a particular tool. It's really, does everyone have a view? Is there a visual of the work and where the work is? That's really a key part of Agile. And if everyone's got that same view, they might still be coming in with different perspectives. Like if one person's developing the front end versus the back end, or let's say you're using Agile for a church function. Who's handling the stuff on stage versus the production in the back,
mm.
and what are they seeing, and how is some things piling up in preparation for that, or how do we make sure it all flows nice and smooth? So those are the kind of things we'll talk about.
Yeah, and as recently I was working on like looking at stories, like
Mhm.
there's a lot of different words that they use that you kind of like, how does somebody new kind of like get to know that those words and be familiarized with that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of terminology that has come out of Agile, but it really didn't start that way. It was really about visualizing the work and limiting that amount of work you have in progress. Things like stories, story points, all this other terminology, that came later. But if you go back to the basics, and that's what I want to cover, is just focus on the basics of how do you visualize that work and how do you make sure you don't have too much going on?
Mm,
Because if you do, what most people don't realize is multitasking is actually a really bad idea. And there's a lot of research uh, beyond this. And I know there's people out there saying, oh, but I'm a great multitasker, but your brain is not. It really is not set up to do that. So I'll give some links to some research
yeah.
during the talk and afterwards. And with Agile, it's how do you visualize different stages of the work so you can see when things are getting jammed up.
Mm.
And then, all right, as a team, how do we want to collaborate on this jam? How do we break the log jam? And so it's always looking at how do we keep things flowing. So we got to visualize it, and we've got to limit what's in progress so we don't get jammed up.
Oh, it's pretty interesting. Like sometimes there's a lot of stuff that I know because I either created it or I
Mhm.
plugged in a cable here, and
Yep.
then this cable goes here, and that makes the connection over here, and then the video shows here. And like I know the system because I kind of designed it, right?
Yep.
And then there's people that want to help, but like how do I make them aware of those connections, like, so sometimes we put the hindrance on ourselves because we're not like documenting correctly,
Yep.
We're not making good how-tos like to train other people to do like simple tasks.
Yep.
Because we got like a lot of people that want to do work, but the work is kind of like hidden, like
Yeah.
there's no easy way to say, oh, like, just press that button, right?
Yeah.
Does Agile also help you in documenting better?
Well, it can be as you think about the visualization. So let's go back to your cable example, because I've done that kind of work as well. So yes, you set it all up and there might be just a rat's nest of cables, but you know how it all goes together. And you might go, all right, if I'm going to help somebody understand this, maybe I need to label some of this stuff. So for me, I would grab some painter's tape and a black marker, and I'd start saying, okay, this is this one. And then I see, let's say the painter's tape is blue, and I go, there's all these blue tags now. I don't know if that helps. So maybe I need to color different cables different ways so people know that's power, don't touch it. That, this one's video, this one's audio. Here's what to look for. Here's different colors. And it's setting up some visual patterns so people understand, okay, here's the kind of work, here's where I can help, where you can help. So touch these things, don't touch those things,
Mm.
because we don't want you to get hurt, or we don't want the work to get impeded. So again, that idea of visualization even kind of moves into the documentation phase. How do we give people just enough documentation, enough information so they can jump in quickly and they don't have to read like pages and pages of stuff, or go through the rat's nest of wires and stuff.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of like I started coding now,
Mhm.
like websites, and we have to label like all the things that you see, right? All the
Yeah.
entities they call it, or
Yeah.
all the objects, right? So I started labeling them a certain way with like a standard. So if it's a button, it starts with BTN, and then it has a name,
Yep.
and then that button is inside of another div
Some kind of container. Yeah. Yeah.
container, right? So you labeling things that make sense. So when you put in the code, you don't have to do so much documentation, but the
Yep.
actual code itself will kind of self-explain because you're
Yeah.
labeling things in a more verbose way, I guess. But
Yeah. And that also assumes if the person coming in to help has similar knowledge. What if they don't? So
mhm,
then you've got to think about, all right, how do I onboard this person? How do I give them enough knowledge that they can help,
mhm.
and they're not needing help to figure out the task? And you can use an agile approach for that as well. So I've hired a bunch of people over the years, and we've used Kanban boards to say, okay, this is the most important thing you need to focus on now for the work you're coming into. This is something you can focus on next week or next month. And we would set up Kanban boards that way, say, okay, this is what you need to do right now to jump in. But here's some other stuff you want to focus on later. And they run their own Kanban board as part of joining the organization or joining the team. But they still can reach out to others, and others on the team can check in with them from time to time. Again, that feedback loop, and say, hey, how's it going? What questions do you have? Show me what you got, and let's go over, how did you wire this up, or how did you code this? And just making sure you got those kind of regular feedback cycles for them and for the rest of the team.
Awesome, awesome. So for those who don't know what's a Kanban, how you say it? Kanban?
Kanban. Yeah.
It's basically like columns, right?
Yeah. It's basically a board with vertical columns. Not always. I'll show some alternatives in the presentation. There's one picture in particular you might enjoy in the presentation, but I'm no spoilers. I'm not
That's
gonna.
what they got to join the
They
meetup, right?
gotta they gotta show up. Yep, they gotta show up. So
Awesome, awesome.
yeah.
So just a reminder, our next meetup is you can find us at meetup.com. Search for Orlando ServiceNow Developers Meetup Group, and it's gonna be April 9th. It's gonna be at our location, 2563 East Erlon Bronson Memorial Highway in Kissimmee. Yeah, and we hope to have a full house and people that will be excited of learning this. And
Yeah, and I'm bringing one other person from Agile Orlando, and if you guys are doing your projects after the talk, we'll keep the talk short. So if you do the projects afterwards, we'll hang around. So if you want to talk about how do you apply some of these Agile concepts to your projects you're doing within the meetup group, we'll hang around for that. Yeah,
so we are offering it through Zoom, and
yeah.
they can perhaps ask their questions, and they can also like we can ask, for you to answer some of those questions for them.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah. I'm I like I said, I've worked with a lot of distributed teams, so bring it on if you're not local.
Awesome. Where are you based right now?
So I'm based on the north side of Orlando.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm up in the Altamont area, so I'll be driving down to Kissimmee myself for that.
I got one final question. So somebody that's a beginner and just wants to get a little bit more involved in what it is agile, like as far as like maybe the personal projects that they may have, what's a good resource for them to look into?
So actually there's some great local resources. Just again, go on Meetup, look for Agile Orlando, and you'll see a bunch of events there. There's both some online kind of Q&A sessions as well as some talks. So the Q&A sessions are referred to as lean coffee. They're basically meetings run in an agile fashion. So you'll get to see what an agile meeting looks like.
Oh,
But anybody's invited, any kind of skill level, and you'll have people there that can answer your questions on Agile. Another great resource is Agile Alliance, and what I'll do is I'll send you a URL, Daniel, that you can put on the Meetup site that gives several different starter points.
cool, cool. Yeah, one time I took a course from my previous job. They used like CVT nuggets, something like that.
Mhm.
And it was a ITIL Foundations course,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But they did talk a lot about the different methodologies, of
Mhm.
agile, like the waterfall, and the one that's like more like a sprint, So it has a lot to do with tech, right? How did it become part of like tech development? Like, was that always like that, or?
So actually, a lot of the concepts came early on from automobile manufacturing, the concepts of lean from Toyotas, the way Toyota made some of their cars in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Those concepts were adapted for software. So how do you make things in a just-in-time fashion? How do you get that rapid feedback? How do you make sure that if there's a problem, anybody on the team can say, "Hey, we got a problem. Let's stop what we're doing and take a look at this really quick." And now all that comes from the Toyota production line. So that workers on the line have what they call an and-on cord. If there's a problem, they pull that cord and they will stop the line.
Wow.
Yeah. So that way it gets fixed right away. So you're not creating a bunch of waste by maybe building faulty car parts or something else. So a lot of those ideas kind of moved into software in the late 90s, and all these small methodologies came together to form Agile.
Wow, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I
Yeah.
mean, not everybody knows that part. Yeah.
But yeah, Toyotas. I got two, so.
Yep. I got a couple here at the house. Yeah.
But yeah, well, thank you so much, Mark, for your time. Yeah, we hope to see everybody at our meetup on April 9th, and definitely we look forward for this talk, and hope to work with you in future projects also.
We'll see you there.